Okay, guys, hey, me, Keith, Elder Rock, back with special episode. This is episode 100 of Arcade Laboratories YouTube channel. So, in our YouTube channel, we're focused on arcade, PCB, restoration, and repair. And I wanted to do something really special for our 100th episode. We've made a lot of videos, and I've had a lot of fun, and I wanted to just take a minute and say how much I appreciate you guys watching my videos and maybe learning. I hope you're learning, and that's the whole point. I'm learning. This is something I'm gonna be doing for the next, I don't know, 5 to 10 years. So the YouTube channel is kind of still a baby. My learning skills are growing exponentially. I'm getting pretty good, and I'm really happy to show you guys that. So for episode 100, what are we doing? We can't do a normal repair. Cannot do a normal repair for 100th episode. So today, since this is about viewers and how much I appreciate you guys watching, we're gonna do viewer mail today. And I had grandeur for these series. I was gonna make a series, probably gonna be 2 or 3 viewer mail lessons, call it. So I've had some really good questions, some questions that actually have stumped me pretty good, and that lets me know I have some really smart people watching my videos, and I really want to call this steel sharpen steel episodes, because I believe, to get better with anything, you need people talking about the technology, test methods, asking questions, and for both parties, it just makes you smarter and makes you better troubleshooters. So, you guys at home fixing your own boards, wanting to get better, asking me questions, I love them because I had to think about them. I'm like, how do I want to answer these questions? I had grandeur. I was going to do long, in-depth video series and lessons, and I think we will eventually. But some of these questions were pretty tough for me. So I think what we're going to do with the viewer mail, with the technical questions, is we're just going to cover these questions from a basic to not intermediate, but a basic, some basic answers. I wish I had some lab stuff to do some lab lessons. But we're going to keep them easy. At least my explanation. We're going to go on the internet together, and we're going to talk about these questions. I'm going to show you some examples and how I relate your questions to my arcade repair, and some, any other experience I'll share. So, and then below, I'm going to post links to all the references to the stuff that we're going to look at online together. And, just like anything online, just be objective. This is by no means an expert reply. I'm just digesting your questions, analyzing how I'm going to use them, and how I would explain it back to somebody. So be objective with the material I'm going to show you. I have, it's been a week since I posted anything, because I've been thinking about this episode. So be objective with anything I show you. I'm going to post some links down below, so it's going to kind of be up to you to go back through the information I'm sharing with you to validate it or see if it's applicable to you. So, with that being said, the only other thing, I do apologize. I am living in sunny Thailand, small village. I'm getting ready to go home on vacation, so I've sent all of my boards home. I shipped all of my boards. I don't have any boards here to actually probe around with you on camera. So I apologize. All my boards are sent home. I don't have a lot of lab equipment here. So I usually rotate home. I'll restock. I'll bring back a bunch of boards in the future. So that's where we are. So we're just going to be kind of talking lessons, learning. And I'm sorry, not an in-depth lab session like I wanted. But stand by, those are coming. We'll do those. We're going to be doing this for the next few years, hopefully 5 to 10 years. So lots more of that coming. So okay, so here's my plan. I'm going to take you guys over to the computer screen I have set up, and we're going to go over this mail. All right, 5-minute introductions. You guys got to love my long videos, right? Okay, so I'm talking off camera here. So let's go. I'm just going to start kind of at viewer, subscriber, YouTube subscriber, Wayne Graham. Wayne, I love your questions. Thank you so much for them. I hope these suit you well, or I hope I can give you enough information to be dangerous. Okay, let's go to Wayne's first question. What can you use the oscilloscope trigger input port used for when testing TTL and CMOS chips on an arcade board? Let's just take that. Okay, so I believe you're talking about how I take that is you're talking about the external trigger on an oscilloscope. So on my oscilloscope, I do have an external trigger, and I looked around for cables. I sent them all home. I don't use the external trigger too much at all, really, but I should. And what it's for? So if you're testing a chip, the external trigger, it allows you to trigger on a different signal other than the one that you're probing on. So I was going to come in here. So if we look at our trigger menu, I already got my trigger menu pulled up. So just a regular trigger. If I'm probing on a data line, an enable line, or just probing on any signal, we can set our trigger, right? We can set it on edge, on edge trigger, pulse, or whatever. We typically choose our source, right? So channel 1, that's our normal setting, I call it. But if you wanted to trigger on an external, if you wanted to trigger on a different signal, you would just go to your external trigger, hit OK, and then from here you would set it up any way you wanted it. So I'm going to take you back over. We'll use this blanking circuit I'm going to show you in a second. So if I wanted to trigger on the output of if I wanted to probe the input on one of the inputs on a latch, and I wanted to trigger on the output, that's what it gives you the ability to do. All right, let's just go over and I'll show you. So for external triggering, this is kind of new for me, guys, so I hope my 100th episode is not a complete failure. So for external trigger, I just coming off these Defender repairs, so I'm just going to stick with Defender. So let's say this is a latch, right? And the outputs are dependent on the inputs. It's a memory circuit, right? So when you change, I'm just going to call this the set or reset, you're gonna get a different output. So if you could connect your external trigger here, like let's say on a rising edge, but be probing over here on input 9 or 10 of this gate. So when this edge goes high, it'll capture the event on your input B. So typically we would like trigger, just on the signal itself, trigger on a rise, trigger on a fall, trigger on a slope. But if this is a good example actually, because with these gates, we kind of know what they should be doing. This is an inverter. I think this is a NOR or OR gate. I'm sorry. Yeah, whatever. So we know that if both of these are ones, it's going to invert and you're going to have a 0. And then, so you can kind of look at your circuit, and if you think you have a bad chip here or a bad input or a bad output, something's not lining up, you can put your external trigger anywhere you want, and so on the rising edge, it'll capture your input here. And then if you know this should be a 1, and that should be a 1, and then that gives you the capability of looking at your signal a little bit different versus than just triggering on it. I hope that makes sense. So external triggers are great. It allows you to get away from your signal and look at it based on another trigger event downstream or upstream even. I mean, you could set your external trigger back here and then watch that measurement when that triggers, then you can see the state of that signal. So I hope that makes sense. But external triggers are good. I actually, after realizing I actually have an external trigger cable and I sent it home. I'm actually going to bring it back now. So thanks, Wayne, for that. So yeah, external triggering, that's what it's for. It just allows you to trigger in another part of the circuit. So let's go back. Let's go back and look at the next part of your question. Okay, this one was kind of good. What you asked me, what do I use for pulse counter to count the data pulses? That's another good question. So to count data pulses, I'm going to go over to this video. So when let's go back to this blanking circuit. So typically, if I need to count pulses, usually I kind of work off a blueprint or a schematic. So if I know, I need to have my sync and blank, like in this example, sync and blanking circuit pulses like this. It shows me my timing. So when I'm running my oscilloscope, I can see all that stuff run. I can trigger on it and kind of zoom in and have a look, and then set and then kind of count my pulses from there. Same thing with like counters, like 161 counters. If my chip is like dividing down, you get a good enough representation on your scope. If you know that you're going like halving your pulses. You start off with I don't know, 500 megahertz. The next output will be 250 megahertz. Will be half of that, half of that, half of that. So I'm not actually using a counter because my scope is not set up for it. Some oscilloscopes like this Keysight, man. This Keysight's really nice. It's what is this guy? This is an MSO 3104 Keysight. This thing is sweet. It has way more functions than that thing. So I just got it kind of paused on a video here. So he's actually taking measurements. He actually you can set your time width, your time frame, and it will count all of your pulses in it. So they have frequency counters, test equipment, different equipment and stuff like that will actually count your pulses. But for arcade repair, yeah, it would be great to have. If you're going into that detail, analyzing signals, and you know how many pulses you're supposed to have, something like this would be great. And I actually have something like this back at my other lab. I do have a nicer oscilloscope back home that I use that will count pulses. But for general troubleshooting on a circuit, that is a nice feature, but it's not necessary to determine if a chip is good or bad or not counting right. I guess without something like this, if you're going into that level of detail, I would imagine not a spectrum analyzer. Oh gosh darn it, a logic analyzer. Sorry, a logic analyzer would help you out because you could actually see your pulses better, and then maybe with the logic analyzer function, you could count those down probably a little bit better, or at least do the math, like see how many you have, and then just do the math for your time. So I hope that's kind of close to what you're looking for. Like I said, I had grandeur of like explaining this all more in detail, but after kind of looking at the questions, I think I was just going to give kind of basic stuff like that. Okay, and I'll post some links below for you guys on all this stuff. Okay, this is Wayne. You're killing me, man. This question was really good. I actually had to go away and kind of do some research on this because I really didn't know. So the question is, the ROM game code is unlatched data and ungated data. which I'm not sure why the ROM game code is coded not to be latched and not gated data, because the arcade game boards have to use logic gates and flip flops to convert the unlatched data into gated logic data and convert the unlatched data into latch data. I'm confused on why the game programmers didn't use hardware instead of software to gate and latch the ROM game code. Awesome question. Dude, that was a tough one for me, but I think I got it. I think I have at least an okay answer for you. I'm going to start at the end of your question. Why did programmers use hardware instead of software to gate and latch the ROM game code? Okay, so again, I'm going to go back to the Defender. I'm going back to the Defender schematics, and I want to get to the one block diagram, and this is how I'm going to explain this. Okay, let's just start off simply by saying when for program ROM accessing your program data. Okay, so in this block diagram, here's your CPU, right? You have your CPU, your main CPU address lines, and in this diagram, in this architecture, your main program or your software is sitting here, right? So here you got your double EEPROMs, and most game boards follow the similar architecture. So I don't, Midway Valley, Williams, Sega, Nintendo. This is going to be all pretty typical. The schematics are going to look a little different. Okay, so let's get into this, your answer. So, for one, your CPU does not use latching, as far as I know, to access your main software, because of it would be like a complete timing issue. So a latch and latching circuitries are for data storage. They store a bit of memory until an input's changed, and then your output will change. Well, how this works, when you start up your game, your CPU has a set of instructions to go to your main program ROM, start accessing different areas in your software ranges, address ranges, and then reads out into your data bus, and then things will distribute from there. So latching would not be something you'd want here, because it would be it would be a timing issue. You don't need it. You don't need latching between your CPU and your ROMs and your software. So that's why I guess the hardware and software is designed the way it is, or at least for arcade boards. So what you'll find here, you'll find buffers, right? You'll find line drivers. So usually next to your CPU, you have buffers, just straight through drivers. Each address line is going to come up and start writing ones and zeros, addresses, to access your main program, your software. So no latching is needed here. No latching between your CPU. And it's also a timing thing, right? So before I get too much further, I did pull up some other stuff I wanted to show you. So let's look at this is a what is this guy? This is 27C512 double EEPROM. So what's your access times? I was going to show access time 45 nanoseconds. So your CPU is going to be accessing your software at around 45 nanoseconds. I mean, that's just access time. It's the read and write time. It's the timing of between the CPU can write and retrieve data, your software, from your EEPROM. Okay, so now let's go over and look at a latch. Let's look at a latch. Okay, so this is actually what is this? This is a D-type latch. Okay, timing on latches work completely different, right? So on this latch, this is a synchronous latch because your outputs are based on the timing of your clock input. Now, your clock input can be anything in a circuit like this. It could be a data line. It could be an address line. It can be a generated clock line from downstream. So the access time is kind of defined within the circuit of a latch. So whatever the latch is trying to do, if it's like a video RAM, you're going to see this more like towards the RAM side of your board architecture. Read write times, access timing, and shift registering and stuff like that for RAMs and for other stuff, but not for accessing program data, like your game software. So this latch, yeah, is driven off your clock. And then if you go down further in the data sheet, more so, if you go down in your data sheet and start looking at the specs, they're not really talking about time. You have current, because latches work on logic levels, logic level high or logic level low. And in this latch, you're going to access on the rising edge of your clock. So if you kind of go down and look through your data sheets, the only mention of your clock is here. So you do have, okay, so your different types, and then you do have limits on your clock speeds. I mean, everything's gonna have like a limit for your access times. So for your clock frequency, like for this latch, it's just kind of telling you your parameters here. No minimum, max for your clock clear set to output, 25 to 40 nanoseconds. So again, it's just not really the time that we want, not really the timing circuit that we want when we're accessing between our program data, our software, and our CPU. Man, I hope that makes sense. Let me read your question again, make sure I got it. Yeah, so I think we kind of covered all of that. That's why they don't really use latched or flip-flops or stuff like that. I could be wrong. There could be some games that for some reason I don't know have latches and flip-flops right there between the CPU and your program ROM. Yeah, I think the software would be, if they wanted some kind of latch circuit in there, I think the software would be difficult given that era of technology. So, great questions. And I actually, that's why it's been a week since I posted anything. I had to go away and think about these. I like that. So, let's go. I hope that's a good answer for that question. Okay. We're gonna come back. We're gonna do a separate video on the power supply, because I can actually answer that a little bit better. Okay, I think in this video, how long are we? Okay, we're at 24 minutes. We're at 24 minutes, guys, and that was a long answer probably to a short question. It's a difficult question, so I think I'm gonna make that the 100th episode. Why not? And then we'll come back, and then we'll get some of these other questions. Okay, guys, thanks for watching. Any more questions, drop them in the comments below, and thanks for watching. Arcade Laboratories out.